Welcome to the GATE Equity webinar series. I'm Kefi Andersen, Graduation Equity Program Supervisor, and today we're talking about how hope-centered education can improve student outcomes. This meeting is being recorded and it'll be posted in the next week or so. It's also in the GATE Equity webinar page, so if you want to follow along, you can do that, and we're going to put the slides in the chat. So if you want to look at them, you can. We chose this topic because we believe that social emotional learning was a highly requested topic on our feedback survey. And we know right now social emotional learning is so important, not just to the students, but also to our staff. I know that for myself, I wish that I'd had more opportunities as a student to get
Kefi, you're muted.
Wah, wah. Okay, we will try again. So how long have I been muted? The magic question. Have you heard anything that I've said?
Yes.
Yeah,
you just
only about 30 seconds.
Okay, good. Okay, so we chose this topic because social emotional learning was a highly requested topic in our feedback survey. And we know that right now, social emotional learning is so important, not just to students, but also to our staff. And I know that for myself, I wish I'd had more opportunities as a student to get empowered and to feel like I could have some agency in tomorrow. So we hope that this webinar gives you some practical ideas that you can use right away. I just wanted to point out, we do have closed captioning available. All you have to do is hit that closed caption button on your screen and you can click show subtitles. So if that's you, please take advantage of that. And in case you didn't know, OSPI has this amazing YouTube channel where we post all of our videos, and we're on YouTube Live this morning. So if you don't want to participate in breakout rooms, you can always do the YouTube Live option. And it's there if you want to see any past recordings or share the videos with friends. So definitely check that out. You can hit subscribe by clicking on the bell on our page, and then you'll know when our videos are fresh and new, and you can enjoy those immediately. If you are here for clock hours, we offer 3 free clock hours for participating, and all you've got to do is register for both webinars and attend. And you can also get partial clock hours if you want. If you only want to do the 1.5 hour option, you can do that as well, depending on how much time you have. There will be a PD enroller evaluation, and then we verify your clock hours, and that should be done about a week in. We are planning to group you at some point, but we also like to know who's in the audience. So if you are willing and able to rename yourself, all you have to do is right click on your picture, or you can go to your name in the participants list and click more and rename. And it would be great if you put your first, last name, your role, and where you're coming from. So if that's a high school, a middle school, whatever you're willing to share, it just gives us some context so we can group you better later on for breakout rooms. And we are changing our breakout room format today so that we're giving mostly presentation in this first hour, and then that last 30 minutes we want to dedicate to the breakout room. So there will be a clean break there for people who don't want to participate, and that's okay. This webinar is brought to you through the Office of System and School Improvement in the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. At OSPI, we believe each student needs to be prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. We're driven to transform K-12 education to a system that's centered on closing opportunity gaps and is characterized by high expectations for all students and educators. And we believe we'll achieve this by developing equity-based policies and supports that empower educators, families, and communities. And we aspire to have all of our work be driven by our values, ensuring equity, collaboration, and service, achieving excellence through continuous improvement, and focusing on the whole child. The GATE Equity webinar was created with the purpose of highlighting practices that increase access to education and ultimately to graduation. Through our webinars, we're striving to go beyond equality, to think about the opportunities we have to examine and dismantle current policies and practices that result in disparate outcomes for our students, with the ultimate goal of ensuring that each student has access to the instruction and support that will make them successful in school and in life. We want to acknowledge historical contexts and engage our students, families, and communities as partners in decision making because they possess the strengths and cultural knowledge that will transform our schools. I am so grateful to live in Olympia every day. It's a truly beautiful place that is at the intersection of the traditional lands of the Squaxin Island, Coast Salish, Cowles, and Nisqually tribes. Each tribe are experts of their own history, so the best practice is for districts to engage in tribal consultation with tribes nearest their district to determine their historical lands. We also have some links on the side here that you can check out if you're curious what the traditional lands are where you're at. We are located near the North Thurston School District, and North Thurston has worked to co-create a really cool acknowledgement through their tribal consultation with the Nisqually Indian tribe, and I'd like to share it with you. These tribes have lived on and cared for this land and these waterways since time immemorial. We make this acknowledgement to open a space of recognition, inclusion, and respect for our sovereign tribal partners and all Indigenous students, families, and staff in our community. And I love that. It's so great. I appreciate that they have put that lovely statement together. We ask the participants this meeting also honor the traditional lands on which each of you are located today. So if you'd like to say where you're coming from, that would be great. We would love to see that. In our office, we have also created a cultural acknowledgement statement that helps us to ground our work. We want to acknowledge the pain and trauma resulting from over 400 years of racism in the United States and against people of the African diaspora. We stand with our communities of color during these unprecedented times of civil unrest, especially those who identify as and or are categorized as Black and or African American. We will continue to center our work in leading with racial equity, and we invite accountability and partnership. We want to offer a moment of silence and afterward, honor the space for people from communities of color to respond to this acknowledgement first. Then we invite allies and others to communicate their comments afterward. And we'll have the chat box open as well. We're going to pause now and reflect. Thank you for participating. We're now opening the floor for our listeners from communities of color to respond to this acknowledgement first. If you'd like to say something, please unmute your mic.
I wanted to apologize. I was running a little late, so I'm kind of catching up.
I want to say thank you so very much. I am Charo Portaro from Cielo, Director of Education, serving mostly Latinx population, people that are marginalized, low-income families, many times with a small education or non-education background for the parents. So I just want to know more about everything that is happening in education in this area, because we want always to inform them. The majority of things are in English, and they need to learn and to receive information in Spanish as well, and to welcome them, just to feel the belonging to this place. So I appreciate very much the time that you just gave through this moment. Thank you.
I also like to say thank you for that. I'm in a community where diversity is rising. I'm from the Yakima area, and I work at one of the high schools. And just as that long pause was there, that's to show that it's hard for people to speak up, giving us that opportunity to speak up. Look at how long it took for a simple thank you, just to realize how devastating it is for those that are coming from a different area to reach out and to get that help. And for all of you guys that are taking this opportunity, thank you very much.
I would just like to say that this acknowledgement builds the trust that we're looking for, that we want to not just give to each other, but also give to our students and share and model what true inclusion looks like. Sometimes we just need that opportunity, like she was saying. And so it's really beautiful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you all for participating. I hope that this statement helps us keep our students at the forefront of our minds. And I also want to draw your attention to the fact that it is Black History Month. Although, like Dina Simmons says, every day is a day to celebrate Black excellence. So let's take the opportunity to highlight and celebrate resistance, creation, joy, laughter, art, music, and innovation. Let's go beyond Black history to Black future so our kids can see themselves in the people we choose to elevate to role models. We can do this, y'all. We can do this. I also want to draw your attention to Holocaust Remembrance. We have an upcoming opportunity for professional learning, educating for change, ensuring Holocaust Remembrance in Washington State. It's happening on April 15th. It is a great opportunity for some good conversation. We're partnering with the Holocaust Center to provide this training. And there's so many interesting statistics that I could share with you, but I want to share with you this one. There are 64% of all US millennials and Gen Z believe that Holocaust education should be compulsory in education. Kids really do want to learn about this, and it's an important thing for them to know about. So I would encourage you to share that out and register today if you get the time. Objectives. So for today, we are going to explore the science of hope and its connection, excuse me, to Washington State social emotional learning standards. We are going to be connecting the concepts of trauma, behavior, and hope. And we're going to review some healthy youth survey data about hope and non-academic barriers to learning. We're also going to learn about Washington Student Assistance Program and how they're using the HOPE scale to understand students' progress. And for those of you who want to opt in, we are going to discuss and apply ideas with colleagues in breakout rooms at the end in that last half hour. With me today, I have Kody Russell. He is the Executive Director of Kitsap Strong. We also have Michelle Dower. She is the Student Support Services and Support Center Manager at ESD 114. And we also have Mandi Paradise. She is our OSPI Prevention Intervention Program Supervisor. I think you guys are really going to enjoy the information that they bring forward. If you were with us last month, Kody is back and as awesome as ever. So we've got them here as well. We do like to get to know our audience, so we're going to launch a poll here to get to know you better. If we don't have your role right, let us know in the chat who you are, and we will check you out as well. We love to know which grade bands we're looking at so that we can tailor our programming to people who are coming. So let us know how familiar you are with the topic as well. And that poll should be running. And while we do that, Kody's gonna grab control of screen. And yeah, we're gonna see who's here. We've got a really big audience this morning. And I'm glad this topic is resonating with y'all. It looks like we've got lots of counselors in the audience so far. and a bunch of secondary folks. People are somewhat familiar with the topic. Yep. Nicely done. And if you're having trouble with the polling, just make sure you're answering all 3 questions. And for some reason, it won't let you turn in a partial response. So I'm going to share these results back. So sorry if you didn't get a chance, but I just want to make sure that people get a chance to see a sample of who's in the audience right now. So we've got lots of counselors, secondary, and a lot of both as well. And then people are somewhat familiar with the topic. So we're going to go to Kody Russell first. Kody, can you tell us about hope and social emotional learning and some behavioral outcomes? What is Kitsap Strong up to?
Well, I accomplished the first goal, which was finding the mute button. So thank you, everyone. It's an honor and privilege to be gathered together today, co-creating this virtual space for us to learn, reflect, and connect. I'm really incredibly blessed to be able to do this work that I'm incredibly passionate about. And it's really talking about this science that I believe makes us all human, and understanding it so that we can apply it and achieve the outcomes that we all seek. So that's the goal for our conversation today, or the hope, if you will, for our conversation today. And we'll just dive into it. So when I think about hope, I've got 2 quotes that come to mind. The first is from Desmond Tutu, that hope is being able to see that there's light despite all the darkness. And hope is also a belief that tomorrow will be better than today, and that you have the power to make it so. I know that there are many other definitions of hope, and I encourage you to throw your definition of hope in the chat. But I want us to think about what we mean when we're saying hope, and the way that we're thinking about it right now is that hope is a belief that tomorrow will be better than today, and you have the power to make it so. There's an action quality to this. And that's the key part about hope that I think we need to be paying attention to. So hope theory is these 3 broad components. The first is around this expectation for a future goal. It's a vision of some outcome that you hope to achieve. It's the willpower, the agency, the motivation, the energy that you deploy towards that goal, and the way power, the steps along the journey, the pathway that you can take to accomplish that goal. These goals can be short-term, like I want to make it successfully through this PowerPoint. And if I lose connection, I'll call back on my cell phone. I have a great team that's wrapped around me that'll take over if I lose connection, right? So I've got a hope that I make it through the PowerPoint slides and I communicate the science to you. I've got energy that I'm deploying towards that, but I also have lots of pathways, and I acknowledge that none of them are free from obstacles. There's a chance that I'll have to turn my video off if my internet broadband gets depleted, right? So we can figure out these different pathways. There's an active aspect to this. Agency without a pathway is a wish. So we use this word all the time in our language. And I know some of our friends on the eastern side of the state might be really hoping that it doesn't snow more on them, or hoping that it gets a little bit warmer. You have lots of energy that you're willing to deploy towards this goal of a sunshiny, warmy day, but you have no pathway to accomplishing that. So that's really just a wish. And I wanted to center this information about hope in this language around social emotional learning. And you'll see here the social emotional learning standards from OSPI. And they broke it into kind of 6 domains, 3 for self and 3 for social. And these domains are, and I put them in bold here, the words that attach to hope in my mind. When you're thinking about self-awareness and you're thinking about hope, the ability to see some future that you want to work towards, deploy your energy towards it, and see all the steps along the journey, well, you need to be able to identify where you're at right now, your personal assets. You need to be able to identify external resources, the pathway that'll help you accomplish your goal. If you're going to be able to deploy your energy continuously along that pathway towards your ultimate goal, you're going to have to be able to regulate your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. As a colleague of mine says, if it's worth working towards, it's, you know, if it's worth working towards, it's got to be hard, right? And so if you're going to accomplish your goal, let's say your goal is graduating from high school, that is a long-term goal. We're talking, for most of us, 12 years of sustained effort and energy towards that goal. You need to be able to motivate yourself, but you also need others around you to help build that intrinsic motivation through helping you vision out, why is having this certificate so important in my life? And then the social awareness, being able to understand each other's perspectives and empathize with one another. And that's what I appreciate about the opening from this conversation today, is creating this space and acknowledgement that we need to be leaning into and getting better and better about creating inclusive spaces that center our shared humanity. So what happens when we flip our lid, so to speak? I'm thinking about what happens to your goals when you become overwhelmed with emotion. So we use the hand model of the brain here. This part of our brain, the brain stem, is responsible largely for regulation. Blood pressure, body temperature, heart rate, our breathing. These are regulation things. Then this part of our brain, our hippocampus and amygdala, this is our emotional fight, flight, or freeze. This is the part of our brain that takes over when we feel like we're in danger. This part of our brain is responsible for relationships. It helps us form relationships. It helps us learn because it's deeply involved in memory and reward and reinforcement. This part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, our corpus callosum, this is the part that kind of goes offline when we flip our lid. This part of our brain is responsible for reasoning. So regulate, relate, and reason. Just like you have no control over how oxygenated blood flows to your fingertip, it always flows through your palm, up through your finger and back down. We similarly have no control over how we process sensory information. We are always processing information first through this pathway. Is this important around regulation? Is this disrupting us? Is this pushing us to a place of dysregulation? Is this information helping us connect? Or do we feel safe enough to listen and learn? And only then are we able to reason. So a quick illustration of executive functioning, if we want to understand hope from this context, we've been watching during this pandemic a whole lot of the Great British Baking Show. And if you want to see executive function on display, that's actually what the show is a test of. I realize they're trying to bake cakes and make yummy desserts, but that's not what they're testing and what people are being evaluated on. It's literally executive functioning. Response inhibition, working memory, emotional control, mental flexibility because things are going to go wrong, sustained attention, planning and prioritizing so that they get everything prepared in the right order and it comes out together at the right time. Goal-directed persistence, right? And so if you're a fan of these shows, these there's another one, that Blowing Glass, that we started watching last night, right? All of these are actually beautiful illustrations of executive functioning. And what you can see happen is what happens when we flip our lid, when we become dysregulated. There are certain things that we know will go offline. Processing load, how much our brain can handle, how much we can remember before it just feels full. Our working memory, that kind of short-term chalkboard that you have in your brain. Your just ability to get started, that can be really disrupted when you are feeling really overwhelmed. Verbal memory, your generalizing ability, your ability to take information from one situation and apply it to a slightly different new situation today, and then organizing and planning. So all of these are really important things that we need to be mindful of. And one of the resource links that you'll get as a follow-up to this is 10 tips for working with people under high levels of stress. So all of us experience stress. When we are under high levels of stress, we all can predictably anticipate that our brains will respond in one of these ways or in all of these different ways. And so then how does that help us think and change our work if we understand this about our own brains and bodies? One quick example of this, I'll just bring forward an example from my parenting with my two sons. So, that initiating task can seem overwhelming, right? When you're under stress, my son reading a book in the morning, I ask him to get dressed. Just getting started and getting dressed is overwhelming. He can't even think of that, right? He's really into what he wants to do, play Legos, read a book. So I will grab a pair of pants and ask him, hey, can you grab a shirt that matches? I didn't get my son dressed, but I offered what we called in the group home that I worked in, hurdle help. I helped him over that first hurdle. I helped break up the insurmountable task, right, of getting dressed into the chunks that he could see. I helped construct that pathway, if you will, towards the short-term goal that I had for him around getting dressed. So let's bring this back to hope. I invite you to use the chat. Does it matter when you're starting a task if you are high hope or low hope? Meaning, if you are trying to learn a new skill or trying to accomplish something, do you think it matters if you believe that you will be successful? Of course, I can't now see the chat, so I'm going to assume that you're saying, yes, it matters if you believe that you're going to be successful when you start a task. And I use this illustration of this young man leaning up against the door because I think this is something we need to know. First is that hope is contextual. It's not a characteristic of individuals. It's an experience that we have. So we can be high hope in a certain situation and low hope in another situation. Getting through this PowerPoint, I'm pretty high hope. I've done it before. I've got some ideas about how I can be successful. I have some friends and colleagues that can support me if anything goes wrong. If I was in the cockpit of a plane and somebody asked me to land the plane, I have no previous lived experience with that. Never flown a plane. That would be really overwhelming. I would be significantly less hope in that situation. But we can also nurture this kind of hope orientation to the world. We can nurture a higher sense of hope through our repeated experiences and through practicing that reflection on our life. I've done hard things before. I've learned really complex tasks before. I've never flown a plane, but I've learned really hard things before. So actually, I got a little bit of hope. I imagine that if I get in that cockpit, there's probably an owner's manual somewhere up there. And there's probably a headset. And if I can figure out how to put it on my ears, I'm certain that somebody will start telling me what to do and what buttons to push, right? So I have a little bit more hope now. But what I want us to understand is in the moment, if you are feeling very low hope, you may be like this young man, where you can't see the opportunities that lie ahead of you because of your current perspective and orientation. Your current perspective is one of defeat and failure, of why bother? I can't accomplish it anyhow. And I think some of our students may be feeling this way right now. In fact, I might argue that low hope is a normal response to the abnormal experiences that we are in right now. For both our teachers and for our students, especially for our adolescents, I think having a low sense of hope right now might be a normal response to navigating a pandemic, witnessing adults around them really struggling to have rich, honest conversations around racial injustice in our nation, climate change. I think there's a lot of things that would lead to a response of feeling a little low hope. But we can nurture hope, and that's why we're here together today. We can nurture a sense of hope. We can, by helping and practicing and building hope. Hope is like an activity that I dislike, but going to the gym, and that my muscles get stronger the more I use them. Guess what? Executive functioning gets stronger the more that we use it. Hope and that hope orientation gets stronger the more that we practice it. And people who are experiencing high hope believe that the future will be better and that they have the power to make it so. They believe that there are many paths to their goals and that none of their paths are free from obstacles. That's the key component here that I think we need to understand, is that high hope individuals or people who are experiencing high hope don't have a blind, irrational belief that tomorrow is just going to be amazing. They acknowledge that if it's worth doing, it's going to be hard. They've done hard things before and they can do hard things again. So I want us to consider this metaphor too, this metaphor around an iceberg. And I know that all models are wrong, some are useful. Human behavior is way more complex than an iceberg, but I think that understanding the physics here might help us understand some of the challenges that show up in your classroom. So if we understand this enough, the behavior that shows up in your classroom might be an adaptive response to the experiences that that child has had, whether it's a traumatic experience or adverse childhood experiences or ACEs. They may have developed a behavior that helps them when they feel unsafe, when they feel like they need a sense of power or control. They have a behavior that they use. Maybe that behavior is really disruptive in your classroom, like it's yelling out because they want some attention, or it's taking something from another student because they feel out of control or they want a sense of power and control. If I just told you that the behavior is a kid who's calling out or being disrespectful or assaulting other students, I'm pretty confident that all of you could address that behavior. But if we don't address the trauma, the underlying issues that's driving that behavior, what happens with this iceberg if you chop the top off? Well, it's basic physics. You just create another top to the iceberg. And I think that you may experience this where you feel like you're playing whack-a-mole. You're addressing this behavior and a new behavior pops up over here and another behavior over there, especially in the work with regards to substance use. We see this all the time. We address one addictive behavior or pattern of behavior and another one emerges. I also want to invite us to think about that it's not just about trauma that may be driving that behavior. It could be an unmet human need that's driving that behavior. And there are some basic core universal human needs. We all have a need for attention. We want to be seen and heard. We have a desire for some sense of safety. We have a desire for power and a sense of control. And these motivations sometimes guiding our behavior, these goals that are guiding our behavior, are not what we would call cognitive goals. They may be neurobiological goals, meaning that they may be goals coming from our regulatory system that we just need to regulate. So the kid's going to get up and run around the room. Even though you're asking them to sit down, they're going to prioritize regulation first, and they feel like they have too much in their body and they need to get it out. So they're just going to get up and move around the room. Or they may feel like they're out of relationship with you and they'll prioritize this. And that might mean that they're calling out and they're getting negative attention, but at least they're getting attention. And suddenly they feel like they're back in relationship with you. So I want us to invite in the idea that unmet human needs will result in behavior patterns. And we can, once we understand the unmet human need, we can be proactive in giving students and our employees opportunities to get attention, safety, power, and control in pro-social ways. And I see this all the time. I witnessed my son's teacher do amazing things, even via Zoom, where she encourages students to take different roles within the classroom setting so that they get an opportunity for a sense of attention, some sense of power and control in a pro-social way. So how do we do this? How do we communicate this? How do we build hope with students? Well, I think it starts by sharing this information with students. Share this science of hope with them. Tell them that hope is about goal-directed behavior. Help them understand goal-directed behavior. Help them think about their behavior from the context of what is my goal right now? What am I actually trying to accomplish? Reframe their life experiences in the context of hope. I think this is most critical, especially for some of the adolescents that you're going to hear Michelle and her team work with. Those adolescents who've had really significant adversity in their life. They have done hard things. Maybe the hard things they did are not pro-social goals, meaning maybe they did a lot of hard things in order to gain access to their drug of choice, or helping them reframe their behavior from the context of hope and see how much energy they deployed to that goal, how many pathways they pursued to try and get their drug of choice. You've now helped them see that they can do hard things. And what happens if their new goal is just graduating from high school or finishing the 9th grade? And you help reframe their life context in that way, it can be very powerful. And then we also need to explore the difference between approach goals and avoidance goals. And we don't have enough time here today, but I want us to, again, invite in the idea that you may have an approach goal, a cognitive goal that you want to finish this trigonometry class. But you may also have an avoidance goal of feeling connected in your peer group, or an avoidance goal. Sorry, you may have an underlying goal, feeling connected in your peer group, and your avoidance goal is you don't want to feel shame. You don't want to feel made fun of. And so you may engage in behaviors that actually disrupt your cognitive goal, but your underlying avoidance goal of just not feeling shame or just not feeling pain or not feeling socially excluded may end up taking precedent over the goal that you said that you wanted to set out for that day. And understanding this, all too often when we're thinking about goal-directed behavior, we focus all our energy on agency, on motivation. And I hear this narrative all the time that individuals are just unmotivated. Students are unmotivated. Employees are unmotivated. I think we need to understand the neuroscience of motivation. And the Harvard Center on the Developing Child has a great working paper on this information. And it has an interactive website that you can click on and learn a lot more. But in kind of condensing this down a little bit, the first is that experiences trigger different neurons in different regions of our brain, and they send chemicals to other regions in our brain. So lots of our brain is involved in motivation. And that we repeat experiences, and the repeated experiences create stronger neural networks, these pathways in our brain that link those experiences to thoughts, emotions, memories, and behaviors. And that these linked pathways create powerful associations between what we do, the memories of how that made us feel physically, emotionally, and that actually drives our behavior. Because we're motivated to repeat those experiences that made us feel good, and we are also motivated to avoid those experiences that made us feel bad. One of the key things that we need to be mindful of here is that addiction fundamentally diverts the motivation system in our brain. It kind of hijacks this whole system. And this can be a behavioral addiction like gambling or cell phone use, or it can be a chemical addiction like heroin or drugs and alcohol. But that these impact our neurological networks in really profound ways. And addiction is not simply a lack of character, a lack of motivation to change their behavior. We need to be mindful that addictions have rewired parts of their brain and parts of the circuitry around the reward and reinforcement. And we need to be very intentional about our work with individuals who've experienced substance use issues. And that's what Michelle's team will talk more about. So what is the opposite of hope? What happens when we're losing hope? So it starts with this. And for this, I like to think about my other son, my 4-year-old. My 4-year-old loves Legos. He has very high hope. This morning, he had a vision in his mind. He wanted to put together this Minecraft Lego set that we had set out. And unfortunately, I couldn't find all the pieces because they'd been disassembled in tubs in our. And so my son is angry, right? And immediately goes to rage because his goal is blocked. When this is a normal response when our goals are blocked, is rage. And because my son's 4, he rapidly also then feels despair. And so anger, throwing something, and tears happen almost simultaneously because he's unable to adjust his goal. He still wants to build that Lego. He hasn't given up on his desire to construct that Lego, but the pathway, the pieces we need, literally the pieces we need to put together to accomplish that goal are missing. And so he is feeling really frustrated. And then, thankfully, my son was able to change, pivot, and have a new goal. He adjusted his goal. So we didn't get to apathy. But apathy is where you just totally give up. That means you're not even deploying any neurological energy, any energy towards that goal. It's a total loss of motivation, if you will. So individuals experiencing low hope recognize their deficiency in pathways and in agency, meaning that they struggle to see all the steps towards their ultimate goal, and they also struggle to feel a sense of intrinsic motivation. So they have lower sense of long-term goals. Individuals experiencing low hope often feel blocked from their goals. They focus on negativity and failure, a lower sense of control, higher anxiety and depression, lower self-esteem, lower problem-solving skills, and a higher likelihood of negative behaviors. So I hope that you're seeing here that an individual's level of hope is really, really powerful. And in 2017, Kitsap Strong led a multi-county effort to try and assess student level hope through the Healthy Youth Survey. You're all hopefully familiar with the Healthy Youth Survey, and we added in 4 questions from the Children's Hope Scale, a scale that's been used for over 25 years. It's been validated across numerous languages and cultures. And the 4 questions that they use is, I can think of many ways to get the things in my life that are important to me. That is pathway thinking. I'm doing just as well as other kids my age. That is agency thinking. When I have a problem, I can come up with lots of ways to solve it. That again is pathway thinking. And I think the things I've done in the past will help me in the future. This is agency thinking. And so we included those questions, and this is in the 2018 Healthy Youth Survey. You're probably well aware the Healthy Youth Survey surveys lots of different things. It's asking about safety and violence behaviors, risk and protective factors. We only got the 4 questions on one version of the survey, so we weren't able to do an analysis of hope with all of these different behaviors that you see listed there. And at the bottom, you see the percent of students and the actual number of students that completed the 2018 Healthy Youth Survey in the state. So thankfully, I am really pleased and so grateful for your incredible work as teachers, as neighbors, as aunties and uncles in our communities, because 49% of our students are high hope. Another 28% are moderately hopeful. And thankfully, only 6% of our students are living in communities where they are experiencing low sensitive hope, low or no hope. And you are probably familiar with this idea around dose response, meaning the more the dose increases, the higher the outcome. So for example, if we increase gallons of gas in your car, the more miles you can drive. Well, what I'm showing you here is the dose response relationship of hope. And we're looking at high anxiety. So you're seeing that over 50% of our 8th and 10th graders reported high anxiety and also reported low hope. So the low hope individuals, over 50% of them also reported high anxiety, as measured by these 2 questions. How often over the last 2 weeks were you bothered by not being able to stop or control worrying, or feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge? Right? A huge portion of our students, over 50% of those low hope kids, are also experiencing high levels of anxiety. Depression. Now, 70% of our 8th graders who said that they were no or low hope, 70% of them also said that they felt sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks in a row, that they stopped doing some usual activities. And I want to remind everyone that the 2 underlying co-occurring mental health conditions alongside substance use is high anxiety and depression. And I had the opportunity to share some of this science information with our adult drug court participants in Kitsap County. Over 130 participants were there. And I had one brave participant raise her hand and say with me, what if you're one of those 70%? What if you're in 8th grade? You're one of those 70% and no one notices. And then the last slide that I want to leave you with here is this idea around suicidal ideation. So 50% of our youth who scored low, just answering those 4 questions. And remember, nothing on those 4 questions is something that you as a teacher or a mandated reporter have to disclose to CPS. So you could ask a student about hope. And when you hear that they say that they're low or no hope, we should be paying attention, because 50% of those individuals who said that they're low or no hope also seriously considered attempting suicide in the last year. So I want us to take a moment here. We're going to encourage you to use Padlet, and we want you to think about everything that I've shared thus far this morning. And how do you see your role in developing students' hope? And how might this information that we've provided impact the students that you support? So we invite you to do that. I'm going to ask the team to go ahead and drop the link to Padlet in the, thank you, Megan. So it's dropped in there. And so you'll open up and you should see something that looks like, of course, now I can't find my Padlet screen. There we go. If you're not familiar with it, it should look a little bit like this. So how do you see your role in developing student hope? How might this information impact the students you provide supports to? Respond with mindfulness and social emotional learning lessons. Yes, absolutely. We've used our HYS data. Need to pay greater attention to the science of hope and relationship building. If you're not familiar with Padlet, they're hard to see, but there's these little gray bars here that you can scroll down. Exposing students to opportunities, beautiful. Teach about hope. Share stories of hope. Yeah. Building capacity of teachers to develop relationships, create healthy climate and culture in the classroom. Wonderful. A lot of great information in there. Thank you for joining in and reflecting and adding some information into that Padlet. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to, I think it's going to Kefi now, or is it going back to Michelle? Thanks.
Mandy and Michelle are going to grab control of the screen. Thank you so much for participating in the Padlet. We learned so much about what people are doing from what you tell us, and it's a great connection to see what other people are up to as well. Next up, we are going to be talking to Mandi Paradise and Michelle Dower. And we did have a couple of questions in the chat, and so I've been checking in with that. And Kody, I just had one question for you. I know in your program, you are looking at a very specific group of students that you're working with. The question was, I think that simply promoting hope to oppressed communities could easily tie into the perspective of privilege. So I'd be curious to explore this. How do we promote hope while linking it to external systems change that youth are a part of? Do you have an opinion? Just curious.
Sure. I think that my easiest response is to shamelessly plug our afternoon conversation where we're talking about hope and equity and life beyond high school, if you will, because I think the question gets at, when I think about white privilege, our society is organized in a way to provide lots of visions, or to help me and my two white sons vision out immense possibilities for their future. And the pathways in our society have been constructed for individuals like me, white, able-bodied, cisgendered, male, to gain access and opportunity to whatever we vision and believe possible for ourselves. And then our culture is also telling us that white men can do literally anything. I think that representation matters. I think having exposure to the stories of incredible humans that look like you helps to influence what you believe you're possible of, or what you're capable of. I think that our systems have a lot of work to do in exploring, are our pathways equitable right now? And if not, who are we giving priority to, and how do we adjust those pathways so that they help all students, especially those who have been oppressed, have access to a vision for their future and the means to obtain that future.
Thanks, Kody. You're very eloquent. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot. We are going to go next to Mandi Paradise. So Mandy, welcome. We're so glad you're here. And Kody, thank you also. What a great presentation. We appreciate you. Mandy, do you want to tell us a little bit about Student Assistance Program?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mandi Paradise. I am the OSPI Program Supervisor for the Prevention Intervention Services Program, including the Student Assistance Program. And I'm here to talk to you today about our program's data highlights related to hope. We're also going to get a chance to hear from my colleague at ESD 114, Michelle Dower. So she'll report on her program's local data. First, let's talk about the Student Assistance Prevention Intervention Services Program, which I just call the Student Assistance Program. It's a system really for helping students so that they can have happier and healthier lives. And we do this by focusing on reducing substance use and promoting mental health. Our Washington OSPI program is based on proven practices that have been refined by OSPI and ESDs over about the last 20 years. So Student Assistance Program is about providing the right services to the right kids at the right time to really help them reduce, stop, or delay substance use and help those students increase their sense of mental health and well-being. Now, Student Assistance Program services are specific to student behavioral health needs. So again, our services focus on some really key things like building student social, emotional, and behavioral skills. And this is done through one-on-one student supports and through small skill building groups. Our programs also provide classroom prevention presentations, staff meeting and assistance for staff in the school buildings, and family support services that strengthen student and family relationships. So because of the nature of our programming, Student Assistance Program does show some obvious impacts when it comes to decreasing student substance use and decreasing antisocial behaviors in schools. The program also shows impacts when it comes to increasing students' perception of risk. This means that students who are in our program are able to increase their understanding about risks associated with the variety of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use. Before Student Assistance Program, many students might have the impression that drinking once a week just isn't a big deal. But by the end of our program, those same students can recognize that there are risk and health impacts of such activities. So it's that increased perception of risk of harm. And as we heard from Kody earlier, like increasing hope is a critical factor for student well-being. And what we know about Student Assistance Program is that it also increases the sense of hope among our participants. So students who are in our program, and that's what we're going to talk about. So in Student Assistance Program, students take both a pre-test and a post-test, and this tells us their use behaviors and their attitudes before and after joining our program. You heard Kody talk about the hope scale questions, things that measure both pathway thinking and agency thinking, and those questions are included in our pre-post test. So that's how we are measuring and assessing for hope among our participants. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. In Student Assistance Program, we have the highlights for our levels of hope, and we're going to specifically talk about levels of high hope. Now, many students have hope, and as Kody showed, there's kind of a tier, and it's not a great one. We have kids who have very low levels of hope, moderate levels of hope, and the lowest among high hope. So that's why we're going to focus on this. So while students do have hope levels, they don't often have high hope. We're using Dr. Chan Hellman's Hope Science and Hope Scale in our program to help determine those levels and differentiations. So let's look at our data. Among middle schoolers who are in our program, only 35% of them had high hope when they first started student assistance. Their post-tests, however, at the end of our program showed that the amount of middle schoolers that then had high hope rose to 48%, which is a positive change increase, a relative change of 34%. Some of our students have family members who use alcohol, marijuana, or other drugs. These are our students that we would classify as having family substance abuse. So for students who reported family substance use, only 24% had high hope when they started our program. And by the end of the program, 33% of our students that reported family substance abuse also reported high hope, which is a relative change increase of 36%. We can see that these kids are moving their trajectory from lower levels of hope to higher levels of hope, and that they're among our most vulnerable students. Now, lastly, we're going to look at students who have used alcohol at the start of our program. Some students, they get referred to our program because they are already using or experimenting with drugs and alcohol or other substances. And for students that were using alcohol when they began our student assistance program, only 21% of them had high levels of hope. And this is our lowest rate for high hope among any of our analyzed student groups. At the end of student assistance program, though, 33% of our students with baseline alcohol use, they then reported high levels of hope. So this is a relative change increase of 52%. It's pretty good. That's the greatest relative increase for any of the analyzed student groups we have. So again, just reminding that building hope among students gives them that ability to perceive them as powerful in their decision making and have a sense of agency, but also willpower. Kody spoke about earlier too, a little bit of the unmet human needs. If you recall the iceberg picture that Kody brought up, things that go unmet are getting attention, having a sense of safety, feeling powerful, and having a sense of control. So the higher levels of hope among students means that they're getting some of those needs met, or those things are coming through clearer to them. And that's what we see in our program, is that students in our program have better access to positive and ongoing attention, higher increased levels of a sense of safety, power, and control. And that gets reflected in the change of their high hope. So next, I'd like to pass the mic to Michelle Dower. Michelle Dower is my colleague at Olympic ESD 114. Michelle's going to share a little bit about the localized program data that happens in her region. Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about your region and move us ahead?
I can. So thank you, Mandy. So I was asked to share about a specific project in Kitsap County because we've seen some amazing outcomes related to hope. The Olympic ESD receives funds from the 0.1% mental health sales tax initiative. And that grant supports part-time student assistance professionals in 7 high schools and part-time mental health therapists in 8 elementary schools. Before I jump into the outcomes, I wanted to give you a brief overview of the students we serve. So this chart lists the frequency of adverse childhood experiences. We served a total of 469 students, 183 were elementary, and 286 were high school. And this is from the 2018-19 school year. Next slide. Here you can see the breakdown of ACEs or adverse childhood experiences. And this particular slide also includes students involved with CPS and foster care. So I'll let you look at that for a moment. The point in those 2 slides being that I think we were serving the targeted population and identifying and referring students with needs to our program. Next slide. We track a variety of outcomes throughout the program, including substance use, grades, attendance. But for today, I'm only going to share with you the hope data. This first chart with the yellow or the gold and blue shows students' level of hope at the beginning of program services and then at the end. It's a 1 to 5 scale, and we see a big improvement. But what is most significant is when you look at the second chart. This chart is reflecting the Healthy Use Survey data within the same county, Kitsap County. And at the end of program services, students in our program had higher levels of hope than their typical 8th, 10th, and 12th grade counterpart. I'm going to say that again because it's really significant. At the end of student assistance programs services, students had higher levels of hope than their typical 8th, 10th, and 12th grade counterparts. Pretty powerful. So how did we get this? What is it that we do? How do student assistance programs build hope? First and foremost, we accept students where they're at. We strive, we do our best to create a non-judgmental environment, recognizing and truly believing that students are more than their behaviors, that their behaviors don't define them and they don't define their future. We do this by creating a safe environment where we listen and hear their story and really try to understand their perspective. And this is where trust can grow and develop. As the relationship and trust develop, the door opens for us to identify the discrepancies between what they're doing, those behaviors, and where they want to go. What do they want in life? What are their goals? We elicit what we call change talk. We also help students identify and name their strengths, which are often seen by others in a negative light. And as that relationship, as we develop that and establish that relationship with students, we're role modeling a healthy relationship for them. And many of the students that we serve, due to their outward behaviors that push others away and often alienate themselves, this might be the first healthy relationship they have with an adult. Our hope is that we demonstrate that the relationship is not unique to us. It's not about the adult, rather that they have the skills and insight to develop this type of relationship with others in their life. Next, we don't give up. We are persistent. This might look like a student saying they're not interested in services, yet we continue to check on them. I guess that would be the case where we don't actually listen to them because we keep coming back saying, I know you weren't interested, just check in to see how you're doing. Those baby steps, with those baby steps, we build a relationship, hoping to change their mind, which often happens. It also means when students feel defeated or go back to negative behaviors or avoidance goals, we're there to help them process and learn what happened and try again. We walk alongside them, helping identify new pathways to reaching their goal, all while conveying a belief that they can do it. Mandy talked a little bit about skill development. So yes, a lot of what we do entails teaching students skills they currently lack. That can range from emotional regulation skills to refusal skills. We use great curriculum, many best practice and proven effective curriculum, but ultimately it's not the curriculum that matters. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that out loud. Curriculum doesn't matter unless you have a relationship. The relationship is always first. Next slide. So the heart of what we do is hope. The heart of our work is hope. We plant seeds of hope on a daily basis, often not seeing them bloom during our time with them, but confident that they will grow in the future. So I wanted to end by sharing a letter that one of my staff received from a former student, which exhibits many of the ideas and strategies that you've heard throughout the presentation today. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you did for me in high school. I don't think I'd have ever made it to where I am today without your guidance, and I'm so thankful to have had you in my corner when I was at my most fragile. In a couple weeks, I'm moving to work at a resort, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm doing great and give a lot of that credit to you. In high school, I didn't know how to deal with my mental illness, and because of it, I couldn't handle the smallest things my environment threw at me. But you taught me my healthy coping mechanisms and a philosophy that I adopted to help me be resilient and empathetic. It wasn't immediate. I made mistakes to get where I am today, but you taught me how to learn from them. This summer, I worked at a program which teaches communication, leadership, and teamwork. Through that, I was able to implement what I've learned and better myself while honing my ability to help others. For me, this all started with you. I don't know if I could tell you just how grateful I am to have had you in my high school. You really impacted me to do better, not just for myself, but to want to help others. I hope every day that you know just how much you do for those you help. And with that, I think we're going to open it up for questions.
Yes, we are. Mandy, did you want to talk a little bit about the criteria for student assistance program? How do students get into that?
Yeah, thank you. So student assistance program, it's really managed through the web of our educational service districts. So each of you, no matter where you're at in the state, has kind of a main contact person. And we are going to be providing that list to you. So if you're wondering, well, who should I talk to learn more? There will be an ESD contact. If you are in ESD region 114, Michelle Dower would be your point of contact. If you were in ESD 105, it would be Emily Nelson. So there's a lot of people, but we'll get you those names. Eligibility, it really has to do with the kind of funding that is, one, unique to your district, and two, unique to your region. In Michelle's case, they have multiple funding streams they're braiding. So really, if a school wants student assistance program and they have funding to bring to the table, they can join. Some schools are eligible through things like CPWI, but all schools are eligible for student assistance program. I just want to say that. If a school does not have student assistance program, that is a conversation to have probably with your ESD about what potential funding can be devised to help that school obtain or provide those services with or in coordination with an ESD. I'm seeing some other questions about grant funding available. You know, there's a lot of variety. Sometimes the ESDs have grants that are already ones that they can leverage into a community or school. Sometimes the community or school themselves brings the funding to the table. So if they've been a safe and drug-free schools grant recipient, or if they have 1/10 of 1% funds in their community, or sometimes schools use part of their district or title funds. So it's a whole tapestry of kind of weaving together in the background. And that's why we really recommend you talk to the ESD lead in this one pager we're about to give you, because that's how you'll be able to best connect and answer some of those questions. And again, eligibility is open to any school to participate. It's the funding that becomes the issue. I'm seeing some other comments. Yes, Karma, I agree with you. It's really unfortunate that it's still based on grant funding. Unfortunately, prevention and intervention just isn't something that's been well funded through our state legislature. And so at this school level, it's always the sort of thing that it's not part of basic education dollars. So we strive to meet as many folks as we can, but we're really at the mercy of discretionary funds and competitive grants. I'm also seeing another question. Is there a book that works with these programs? Yeah. Thank you to Anne for saying read Hope Rising by Chan Hellman. That book is the best way to wrap around the science of hope. A lot of the things that both Kody and Michelle and myself presented on today, including some of those key terms we're using like way power, willpower, pathways, agency, and the actual science behind it. Because if we can measure hope, sometimes those other intangible things that you may experience, we know we have a lot of social workers and school counselors and other support staff on our call today. If you're looking, prevention especially is one of those fields where you can't measure what you've prevented, right? People are always like, well, how do we measure the metrics of your effectiveness of your program? How do we know that school counseling is working? And you're like, well, it works. We can't tell you that the kid graduated, even though they graduated 4 or 5 in a 5 years versus 4 years, that's still a win, right? But you can start to paint a picture if you use the Hope Science. The Hope Science shows students' ability to maybe reduce the amount of avoidance goals. How many students are making their goals on avoidance of things versus making their goals in hope of things. So just that mental model shift is a really powerful way to communicate, not just things like prevention and intervention work around substance use, but also behavioral health broadly, social emotional well-being. These are the underpinnings of, I think, the resiliency skills that help students thrive into young adulthood and the rest of their life scope.
Man, I was going to add just one more thing that I forgot to say in my presentation. Another benefit of utilizing the Hope Scale isn't only about our students, but it's for staff. So for those of you that work in that role, student assistants, counselors, support people, sometimes we have these lofty goals of reduce substance use, increase grades, all really important. But we can sometimes feel a little defeated, and hope is like that thing that we can grab onto, say, I know we're not there yet. We haven't maybe done these big lofty things, but we're seeing a change in hope. And it's really motivating for staff. And they know in their heart they're making a difference, but sometimes when they only hear about these big lofty goals, they start to feel a little defeated. So hope, I think, has been helpful in the motivation around my staff as well.
I saw one more question come in, and Michelle, you can jump in with me on this. Oh, I'm sorry, what?
We're about at time.
Okay.
So if you would like to stick around and chat with Mandy and Michelle, we will be in the main room and you can stay and chat. But I do want to make sure that we get to resources. At OSPI, we do have a funding document that you can look at if you are interested in that. There are these amazing HOPE worksheets that I know Kody has used in the past. I believe Kody has used in the past. So if you're curious about those questions and you'd like to be able to access those are there. And there were also these other resources. Kody, did you want to talk about those two? Working with people under stress?
Sure, yeah, just quickly, the HOPE worksheet is a tool from Dr. Chan Hellman that takes you through some questions. The intention is to try and give you the experience of really visioning, thinking about your pathway and building a sense of intrinsic motivation or agency. I think there could be some work done, and I'm excited to collaborate with some local educators to adapt the HOPE worksheet to be more age appropriate for various ages and stages. The Working with People Under Stress is a document from Dr. Deborah Gray, I believe is her name. It's got some great practical tips on language and how we communicate when people are under stress. And then the Hope Scale Community Toolkit is a toolkit that we developed in partnership with the Kitsap Public Health District that gives some guidance around best practices for measuring hope. And there's an Excel spreadsheet that's built. So don't go recreating the Excel spreadsheet, just email us and we can send you a link to the Excel spreadsheet for inputting the data. So thank you.
Awesome, thanks Kody. We also have available, the Healthy Youth Survey is such a great tool just to look at regional results. So if you haven't checked out the Healthy Youth Survey results, it's a great place to start to look at those results for those hope questions and considering some factors in your community. You can also connect with your regional student assistance program person, and that link is in the chat if you're curious about what's going on in your area. And of course, you can also get personalized support from our team if you're not getting, if you have a specific problem that you want to talk about, or you just want the discussion. Of course, you can also contact any of our presenters from today. We've got our email addresses in the slide deck if you want to grab those. Next month, we are going to be talking about the power of school improvement planning. We're going to talk about why goal setting is so important to education and what helps make school improvement goals a reality. And this afternoon, we're going to have some more time to talk about hope and building hope as a pathway to the future. We've also got with us our gems and gents. And so that's going to be really cool. So if you would like to know more about this and hang out with us a little more, that's coming up. I do want to put in the chat, there's a GATE evaluation. And usually we would run this as a poll, but I really need more information from y'all because we're planning our next season of GATE equity webinars. And I'd love to get your ideas for what you want to see, what kind of supports make sense to you right now. So that link is in the chat. Please take a minute and let us know what we can do to help you. At this point, we are we're gonna take a turn and we're gonna go into breakout rooms. So if breakout rooms is not your thing, thank you so much for coming and feel free to sign off, and we're gonna give you a good 30 seconds to do that. And for people who would like to stick around and chat with colleagues from across the state, we are going to have several questions. So you saw them in the Padlet, and we can continue to use the Padlet to capture these thoughts. And we're going to put you in breakout rooms where you can chat. And then, yeah, we're going to do that for, I think, the remainder of our program. So we'll call you back about 11:30, or I'm sorry, 11:25 maybe, and get some answers and we can have some large group discussion. But for right now, we are going to put you in breakout rooms with a few people. And I'm just going to make sure we've got folks in a good spot. And you should be able to go to those breakout rooms right now.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Carla. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm multitasking here.
You're fine.
I have some kids.
Bless you. I have 3 large dogs, so.
I also have a dog too, though. He's whining too right now.
Oh, goodness.
What are we
Oh,
supposed to be doing? I'm sorry.
No, we're just supposed to talk about, just, how did you know about Hope Science before coming today? Is it something that you're using, familiar with? Just kind of have some dialogue about the Hope and how we might use it. Or I'm with OSPI. So if there's things you want to, share that would help support your work, that would be great. Where are you from, Carla?
I'm from the Quileute Tribal School. I'm the school counselor there.
Great. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I see Deborah. Sorry, Carla. I see Deborah unmuted too. Hi, Deborah.
Yes, hi. How are you?
Good. I'm Dixie. I'm from OSPI.
Nice to meet you.
Oh,
Hi, y'all. I'm Julie. Sorry. I'm doing multiple things at the same time, so I can't multitasking. Sorry about that, but
no.
I know this is new. This is actually my first time attending this seminar, so it's definitely a learning experience. Looking at the data and all that, interesting to see. So yeah, but unfortunately, I don't have any specific situation right now to share out. But anybody else has it, feel free to.
No, thank you. Thank you. So,
Well, I think it's a great, I just love the topic because I think it's just so important. And I did not hear about Hope Science before, but I definitely want to use it. I want to start using it in any way I can because I just think we're at that point now, it's like, we were at that point a long time ago, but now it's like even more serious.
yeah.
It's gotten to the next level at this point. So
Yeah, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
At the state, obviously it ties straight into high school and beyond planning. I mean, my unit is the K-12 supports and we do all the graduation work. So, it's there. It kind of gives you a theoretical underpinning to what I think we were talking about who do you want to be? What does that look like? What's the pathways to get you there? And let's, provide some support, mentoring, motivation to keep you moving and find that motivation. And break it down into things that maybe are a little bit more manageable than, putting it way out there. So I love that it takes this kind of thing. I see it all the time, even in my own family, like some families just do it naturally. Some kids just do it naturally, but there is some intentional things that you can build and learn. And then they just become second nature to breaking down problems and things that are in front of you into manageable kind of chunks and just that processing. So I found it really helpful in my own personal life and then professionally. And last thing I'll say is we're doing some work at the state agency with pre-K and early grades to take a look at what does hope look like to young people. And it's really just about showing through books, through, readings, through that kind of thing. It really is applicable at any age. It's just how you go about showing goals, pathways, and agency. So Deborah, I'll be quiet so you can share.
Well, that's, I just remember some years ago when it was still the Office of Student School Success.
Yes.
Back in those days, there was a program that we were looking at and different schools were adopting around hope. And I'm trying now, it just went out of my head what the name of it was, but helping to build resilience, but also the sense of self-efficacy. And then just recently I've been reading Gladwell's book on David and Goliath about when a disadvantage really becomes the advantage. And in one of the chapters, he's talking about dyslexia. And in one of the individuals, he had just struggled to get through school. In fact, was kicked out of school because he couldn't read at various times, but later on got interested in options trading. He was a construction guy, showed up at the stock market, and then some guy was leaving to go to the airport, and he said, got in the cab with him, and he pretended he knew something about it. Got the job with as in options trading, which means like nada to me. Bluffed his way through that. Well, he's the chairman, CEO of Goldman Sachs. But his advantage was he wasn't afraid of failure. He'd failed so many times. It became his strength. So, and you know, when I read that, I kept thinking, what had his family done to support that for him, that he was willing to keep picking up and trying? Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty powerful kind of story.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Absolutely. And that's why I love when Kody said that. It's not like high hope individuals have this, panacea that life's going to be wonderful and it's not going to be work, but they do have the ability to identify pathways and recognize that there's going to be problems, and even start thinking about, your plan. What's your plan B? We talk about that all the time. Like, that might not work out. So what's your plan B? Like what, how are you going to pivot? What are you going to do? And you're just always like in a chess game, just one step ahead of, and acknowledging there's going to be failure. And that's a good thing, right?
That
if you're not
like
failing,
the
you're
way
not
we
lower than-
teach math now. Making a mistake is just a part of learning, that it's creating sort of that risk-free learning environment, but also having a sense of self-efficacy that, if I think about this, I can figure it out. I can figure out another pathway. I can have another.
I was going to ask real quick.
Go ahead, Carla.
Oh, Dixie, I was going to ask real quick before we leave. Do you have any lesson plans that have been created for based on the Hope Science for like High School Beyond plan? Like, I'd love to shoot my my advisors at my school some lesson plans, on Hope Science, because it's one thing to go ahead and me look at it and all that.
Raise your hand and just so that we can have order. We can call on you. How about that? What do you think the group needs to hear about from these awesome breakout room discussions?
This is Michelle. I know there was someone in my breakout room that works for a nonprofit, so hopefully she will attend the afternoon, but really interested to hear or see examples of nonprofit, like are there questionnaire surveys that they're utilizing already? So that came up.
Awesome. Karen, I see your hands. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, well, we brought up the idea of just the adults, the teachers, the people who are supporting, and that they need to learn how to be self-regulated. They need to understand hope for themselves, and sometimes we just jump into how to help students, how to jump in, and we don't have the tools we do. And so again, the people above us, the systems, the administration, needing to actually prioritize instead of self-care being on the side, prioritize and make that part of how we are serving. Because if we aren't well, then our students won't be well. So putting a little more emphasis on all of this information and resources for the teachers and staff.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Karen. Let's hear from Cheryl.
Thank you.
Are you closing it out?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
May I talk?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I think that we have also to include parents and guardians because we need also to know and understand better about this topic. And this topic is for all of us. That is what I would say. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I see Keely.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to publicly thank Kate Stetzner. I was in a breakout room with the perfect person, and I wanted to thank her for giving me some hope. So great session. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for participating. Kate's a rock star. She's the one to talk to. All right. Other things out there that people want to share? All right.
Kefi, this is Dixie. Is Kody still here?
I believe Kody's still here.
I'm curious, Kody, if you've done any work with hope in your organization and what that work looks like, or you know anyone that has.
Yeah, Dixie, quickly, there's some interesting work around hope in an organization and concept of collective hope that Dr. Chan Hellman's been researching and thinking about. And he's been working alongside the prosecutor's office in Thurston County. He's been trying to implement some of this and using a framework on hope as a way to understand leadership practices there. So that'd probably be the most relevant thing. I'd like to say, yeah, that we use this in our organization. I'm not measuring my employees' hope level, so not to that degree or that extent, but definitely think that we try and use this science framework along with lots of other ones to help us understand our work. So yeah.
I have a question. I really am curious about how hope is used in the arts community in the fields of dance, music, arts. And if you've ever, it's kind of a big question, but I'm hoping to look into that to apply hope in my work as a dance teacher. So it's a big question, but I really am hopeful that there's work in those areas that we can get into specifics within our own area of expertise.
I appreciate the question. I'll respond quick, and then if anybody else has something to offer. I think, you know, if we remember that hope in a nutshell is trying to measure goal-oriented behavior, a vision for a goal, our motivation to accomplishing that goal, and the pathways to getting there, I think we can apply that to most of our work. And when you're talking about dance, right? Like, do I think I can learn this two-step, the waltz, right? Like, and I think that a lot of it is about we haven't been measuring it. Lots of professions haven't been measuring hope. So I would say candidly that you're probably doing an awesome job at building hope for those students that learn how to dance, right? Like that's something that's happening as they're accomplishing their goal. The question also gets to who are the ones that we're not doing as good a job of nurturing hope with and why, and how do we get better about that? And I think we only get there by focusing a little bit more intently on hope, thinking critically about it, and exploring it with the humans that we're working alongside.
I might add too, you know, one of the beautiful things about the hope science underpinning, and Kody, maybe you can help me with language here because it's been a while since I've used the language, but that discernment between avoidance, motivated goals, and what's the other type of goal? That's what I'm forgetting.
Approach goals.
I'm sorry, what?
Approach goals.
Approach goals. So if we use dance as an example, one thing that might be an avoidance goal is I actually don't know.
I don't want to look foolish, right?
Yeah, I don't want to be embarrassed. So
Yeah.
I'm going to practice nonstop. So the practicing isn't being motivated by a want to improve a technique, but by being afraid to be ridiculed or embarrassed.
or maybe it's body image, wanting to have a certain body shape because they don't want to be so avoiding negative experiences is the motivator there, as opposed to an approach goal, which might be more oriented around wanting to come at a goal or drive towards a goal for a different reason. And I think when you start to learn that discernment underneath what the motivation is, and no matter what kind of work any of us are doing, but we see this especially true for some of our youth most vulnerable to risk, right? And in student assistance program, we pull out that discernment. If students are doing their best to move ahead towards goals, but have this like never leaving, never ceasing feeling of just kind of overall dread or high kind of toxic stress because of so many things in their life that they feel like they're trying to escape from or avoid the pain of, then that gives us insight as educators and caring adults. And I agree with what Charo said, and I think Karen said, that there's a role for this for people of all ages and our families as well, that discernment of how we even use it in a family system or in an after school setting system of how are we encouraging motivation, and is it reinforcing avoidance goals, or is it helping kids to discern the difference between those two things at the right age and time, so that they can themselves don't have to have that judgmental voice in the back of their head. So that's when we think about caring and trust and safety. The caring and trusting adults are probably the ones that are consciously or not helping kids have approach goals.
Mandy, I would just add, that's one of the reasons why the list I chose of how we do it. So how do I say this? SAPs are amazing, professional, great. And what they do sometimes is really basic and simple. Just putting in context that all of us can do those basic things about connecting with kids where they're at, trying to not be judgmental, seeing them outside of those behaviors that tend to push us away. They're kind of prickly sometimes. They're loud, they're in our face, they're telling us to F off, but recognize like they're more than that. There's more to them, and really even extending that to you're more than the good stuff too, right? You're greater than these outside behaviors that we see.
And holding that hope, not just for our students, but for our colleagues. We started this conversation with a recognition of equity and racial justice, and that we might be seeing that amongst ourselves too. Our call to do such work being motivated by wanting to avoid embarrassment or being called, and being equally or more so motivated by the willingness and wantingness to do right by our friends, family, and colleagues. So it's something we can apply to many aspects of our lives, and not just for kids. I'm going to pause there. Thank you for giving me so much of the floor.
And thank you to our audience. We're about out of time. What a great day. So much good information. I feel so inspired by y'all. We will see you all this afternoon for Social Emotional Learning 201 if you'd like to come. It's Building Hope as a Pathway to the Future. It's going to be great. So if this energized you, share with a friend, bring them along, and we'll see you soon. Bye all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.